Well, recently I was in a state of deep peace for about 2 weeks after I came back from New York at the monastery. And one of the practices that the Buddha recommended was mindfulness of the mind states. And so I've been practicing that a little bit more frequently of late, just being aware of my different mind states. So when sad, be aware, there's sadness. When there's anger, there's anger. When the mind is refined, the mind is very refined. When the mind is agitated, the mind is agitated. Many people mistakenly think that mindfulness is about having deep peace all the time. But that's not actually the case. Mindfulness means awareness. So, if there is deep peace happening, great, be aware of that. And if there's not deep peace happening, great, be aware of that. But whatever your state of mind is, whether it's in a forgetfulness or deep remembering, just be aware. This is where the mind is at right now. So I was practicing this because I was feeling very grateful for this state of mind that I was in for 2 weeks, and just a peacefulness. It wasn't as deep as samadhi, like I experienced last year, and it certainly wasn't kensho, a glimpse of enlightenment, like a few years ago. It was just peacefulness, and so I noticed that there were ripples in the peacefulness, but it always came back to the peacefulness. So, I would maybe get irritated for a few seconds, but it would just go right back to peacefulness. And then sometimes I'd feel a little bit of sadness about something, but then it'd go right back to peacefulness. It just, no matter what was happening, it just kept going back to peacefulness. And I was enjoying that. But I was also watching it, just notice any changes. Because I know all states of mind are impermanent, since everything in this universe of our human experience is impermanent. So, I've learned over the years not to be attached to any particular mind states, but just to be with it, and to also be with it as it changes to other mind states. Well, this time I practiced very diligently watching my mind states in this past week, and just watching it, seeing if there were any changes. And on Thursday last week, in the afternoon, I felt when it actually shifted from the peacefulness to getting agitated and going further down and further down. And it had to do with, I was noticing what were the thoughts in my mind as this was happening, and I was allowing myself to be agitated about a friend that I really wanted to help, but I wasn't able to really do much for him, and I was feeling a little agitated about it. But then I had felt that from time to time in the last 2 weeks, but it always went back to peacefulness. So what made the difference this time? So I was observing what was different. Well, I was in Austin last week, and in our household of 5 people, 5 friends, one of my housemates down there was experiencing a deep depression. And actually, I could feel it palpably in the house. It was very severe. I found out later that he goes through this every year for 3 months, September through December. It was very, very severe for him. And when I thought I was trying to be helpful and offering some words of advice gently, which I thought was doing my good deed, he was very reactive to it. So I noticed as I was thinking about that and feeling the energy in the house just so dense, my state of peace wasn't able to sustain, and I started falling. But I wasn't allowing myself to lose the mindfulness. I still stayed mindful, even as I was dropping from peace into anxiety. And I was just watching it. And it was interesting that because my mind was coming from a place of deep peace and mindfulness, as I dropped into the state of anxiety, I noticed that things externally were starting to manifest that same anxiety too. So they were matching, inner and outer were matching. As I was feeling anxiety, I was supposed to get ready for a dinner party, and I couldn't because at that moment all the water shut down in the house. And there was a big truck outside. They were trying to fix something, and something got broken or whatever. Anyway, so I didn't know what I was going to do, how I'm going to, shower and everything. And I was actually in the middle of washing the dishes, and I was like soapy hands and everything. And then a few other things. Someone sent a text, and then I got a voicemail of someone mad at me about something. Anyway, it was funny to me that as my mind state was going into a state of anxiety, I was quickly manifesting externally. Maybe because my mind was just so present. It was the manifestation of the mind externally was able to manifest quite dramatically. Well, anyway, I stayed with this state of mind of anxiety for about a day and a half. And normally for me, when I go into anxiety state, that can lead to depression state. But I knew enough about the practice to keep staying mindful. And mindfulness has actually more than one meaning. It doesn't just mean awareness. It also has, that's the more accepting aspect of mindfulness, but there's also an active aspect of mindfulness, which is to see what's going on and then to gently bring yourself back to the practice. So I was gently bringing myself to remembering, so when I go into anxiety and to prevent depression, what do I do? Well, I have all these wonderful practices. So I started to do all of them. I went out, took a walk out in nature, got some sunshine, made sure I ate correctly, had my vitamin supplements, I made sure I had enough sleep that evening, I made sure I didn't watch any movies or listen to anything on the radio that was going to be very agitating. I went to a yoga class the next day in the morning, and I made sure I did all my meditations that day and the next day. And I also another practice, I also made sure I hung out with people who were more enlightened than me. So I went to the Zen Center and I had a nice chat with the Zen teacher, and we took a nice walk also together for several minutes. And that's very nice to walk with my Zen teacher down there. And so, naturally, organically, I noticed mindfully that my mind state went from anxiety not to depression, but went back to a normal state of consciousness. So I'm not really in the peace state at the moment, but I'm at least in normal state. But I'm not attached. Our practice is not to be attached to bliss states. Our practice is to just be aware of whatever state we're in. And just to practice, keep practicing. And to notice when you do certain things, where does your mind state go? And when you do other things, where does your mind state go? It's important to know cause and effect relationships of our experience. Because most of the time we're completely ignorant that we actually have any power over anything. We feel like victims because we don't realize that, we can actually do something about our mind states. We can actually do something to change our consciousness. But we most of the time, because we don't realize we do have that power, we feel like victim to whatever emotions may arise. So as I was contemplating this, it was nice to just stay mindful with this. I realized that as I meditated on this, I realized, at least for right now, I see 7 particular mind states in my own experience. Really 6, because I haven't really experienced the 7th one. But I know it exists. So I think I'll write on the board my experience of 7 mind states, and then I will hopefully talk about the actual topic of the evening, which I had advertised, which is the 10 stages of enlightenment. But I thought I would share something from my personal experience first with you tonight. I also want to share that sometimes we are doing the work of a bodhisattva just by being present. Even if we don't say anything or do anything external, just being present in a situation can bring transformation invisibly. And I do believe in that story from China where, a village was having a lot of chaos and illnesses and violence that was happening, and just kind of bad things were just happening, it seemed, in the village. And so they asked the hermit that lived in the mountain, the Taoist, wise old hermit, to please come down and help us. And so he came down, but he didn't do anything. He just walked among the people and chatted with people. He meditated, and he ate meals with people, and he just enjoyed being peaceful in his hut in the village. And after several weeks, everything started to change in the village. People were more peaceful. There was less agitation, less violence, less crime. Things were becoming more and more harmonious. And then, when everything seemed fine again, he knew it was time to walk back up the mountain. And I think all of us have that mission. Many times I hear from people, "What is my mission in life? I want to know. Am I fulfilling my mission in life?" And I smile, because I realize just being you is already fulfilling your mission. Can you just be who you are? Just sit and be, smile, and just be who you are. Let that radiate. So as I was sitting in that house, I realized that my home environment is very important for me because it's sanctuary for me. Perhaps if I wasn't in that environment, I might have sustained the peace state a little longer. But when my home environment is agitated, I know that I am not strong enough to sustain a peace state because I absorb especially the things in my home environment. Which is why, for the last several years, I've always tried to make sure that my home environment is optimal, because I know it's important for me. It's what nurtures me. But at the same time, I realized that just being there I was fulfilling a mission. Just being there, and maybe on some deep, invisible level, I was doing the bodhisattva work of just being with the depression energy in the house, and just being with it. And maybe I wasn't personally strong enough to sustain the peace state, but through mindfulness, I allowed myself not to go any further than just the anxiety state. And I was able to lift it back up to normal state within just 2 days, which is a pretty good feat for me, because normally it takes weeks for me. So I smiled in gratitude that I learned something from this experience. And I also noticed that this roommate also finally got out of his room and started doing things, and it didn't seem as heavy in the depression anymore. I have no idea if it had anything to do with me, but I do believe that possibly there was something to do with my just being present there. And he'll never thank me. He will never realize if I did anything for him just by being present, and that's okay. A true bodhisattva doesn't need applause. Doesn't need people to thank you. I think our greatest applause is when we know that we've just done what we've done, when we're just being who we are. And that's all. Just being who we are. Just like a flower doesn't need to do very much, just be a flower. And People smile when they encounter the flower, when they smell the fragrance. So, through this observation, instead of being upset that I lost peace, I used it as an opportunity to learn. And because I learned, I now can share with you. So for me, anyway, in my experience, and I'm sure there's many more mind states than these, but these are the main ones that I go through, it seems. At the lowest, there's the depression mind state, which is very connected for me with the anxiety mind state. And then there's what might be considered normal mind state. And then I call the peace state, maybe, I just use a fancy word like shanti. Shanti just means peace. Because I distinguish it from samadhi, which is a much deeper experience of blissful peace and oneness of mind and body. And then even deeper than that is what in Japanese Zen is called kensho, which is completely, not just oneness of body and mind, but dropping all identification with body and mind altogether, and just remembering that you are actually not the body and mind, but just infinite spaciousness. There's really no words for it, which is why Buddhists like to use the word emptiness. But when we use the word emptiness, this English translation, emptiness, for us, emptiness also has a negative connotation. I feel empty. But that's not actually the meaning of the word. It's more of an empty, like if this room is like empty, it's spacious, it's free, it's liberated. It's just, there's so much potentiality and possibility, you see, rather than clutter. So you could think of emptiness as completely non-cluttered by all of our crazy ideas and notions of whatever reality is, but just reality as it is, uncluttered. So that's, and then of course what I have not yet experienced, but when you have kensho, it's like a glimpse of satori, which is full enlightenment, which would be like a full-time kensho, I suppose. But anyway, I've only had maybe kensho once or twice, samadhi a few times, and shanti once in a while. Most of the time I'm in normal state. And a lot of the times I may be in anxiety or depression, which I've experienced for much of my life now and then. But now I don't judge it, because I realize now sometimes things happen for a reason, and everything can be used as compost for creating the garden of beauty in your life. Because I have experienced a lot of depression and anxiety throughout the years, I have a lot more compassion for those who also experience anxiety and depression. And because I've had to work on my own anxiety and depression, I now have a lot more things to offer to others who may ask me for some advice on how to handle and manage their anxiety and depression from my own personal experience. So I no longer judge when I may enter into states like that anymore. But now I have the tool of being able to be in it mindfully. Because when we can be mindful in whatever state we're in, we will learn things that we can share with others. And really, that's why we practice. It's not just only for our own benefit, but so that we can share the benefits with all people. So don't think that you're being depressed alone. Don't think that you're being anxious alone. You're not. Anything you are going through, it is always an opportunity to learn and to grow through it so that you can share and bless others. So next time you are in anxiety or depression, see if you can remember that little glimmer of truth as you're going through it. And realize that you're going through it for the sake of others, to help others who may be in it even deeper than you are, who will need you to shine your light for them. So, when I mention kensho, in my experience of kensho, certain insights arose spontaneously, And one of them was understanding why the universe exists and what this is all about, and why is there humans, and what is the whole thing about the earth and history and all of that. So it's just a glimpse. I'm not claiming absolute truth at all. I'm just saying this is what I glimpsed. And I shared it with one of my Zen teachers in Minnesota, and she said this is perfectly in harmony with Buddhist understanding, so I'm going to share it with you. All right, so some of you may have heard this teaching already, so I think it's on our website in an audio. I don't know what it's entitled, but anyway, the first stage, and I'm going to say stages of enlightenment, but it's not actually linear, because you can actually jump and repeat stages, and you can skip and go back, and so. But anyway, eventually everyone goes through all 10. So we start off with pure innocence, and then, whether you believe in pre-life or reincarnation, all of stuff, or just this life, it doesn't really matter, because you can think of this as the innocence of being a baby, or you can also think of it as innocence as being a spiritual being before incarnating. However you want to think of it, doesn't matter to me. We all start there, but soon after we are born into this world, this interesting world, we begin to suffer. And we feel lost. And honestly, stage 2 actually, it coexists with all the other ones too. But we enter into this stage of our path of existence. It seems like from innocence right into feeling lost and not knowing why it is there's so much craziness and it's all this suffering. And as a child, it's really, really quite confusing. But eventually, as we keep growing up, we begin to seek answers. We begin to seek some sort of way through this to transform this suffering, to understand what is the meaning of life. And so we may start doing some shopping around. And by the way, this is more my experience, not necessarily everyone's, but you might be able to relate to this stage at another point in your life. It doesn't have to necessarily be in this order for you, because everyone's different. But you might seek the truth. You might seek answers, and you might try this or try that. Try Christianity. Try Buddhism. Try yoga. Try meditation. Whatever. Just try all kinds of things. Do some spiritual window shopping. But eventually, it's important after the seeking stage to commit to a path that's going to work for you. And so many people, including me, we've committed to something. Let's say in my early years I committed to being more diligent at going to church and reading the Bible and going to prayer meetings and all of that. So I even started committing to giving some donations, and because I knew that these were good practices, and committing to keeping the commandments and all of those things. Now, for me, as I was doing all of this, I still felt there was something missing. And I thought, is this all there is to spirituality, just going to church? And I just felt like there's something not quite fully there yet. And so I began to explore again. I started seeking again, and I stumbled upon meditation practice. Meditation is not the only kind of practice in this stage. There's many others, but it's the one that I discovered that would help me with the transformation of consciousness. And so I began to learn meditation. I probably could have learned it from some Christian meditation teacher, but I didn't know any. There's so few of them. So, at least here. So I discovered it through a Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And so then I began to learn to meditate and to start meditating. And then as I continued in my meditation practice for several years, I began to deepen in the practice and to experience breakthroughs and insights through the practice. So I began to be more committed to a meditation practice and to deepen and to have breakthrough experiences. And then, a few years ago, I finally I had Kensho experience, which is basically just a glimpse of awakening or a glimpse of enlightenment. Some people actually call it awakening. And that's okay to call it awakening as long as you know there's more than that. There's a deeper awakening. If you want to call that awakening, fine, but there's also a deeper awakening. If you want to call that enlightenment, fine, but there's actually a much fuller experience of enlightenment than that, which is why I don't even want to call it enlightenment, because it's just a glimpse of our true reality. So then, ever since then, I've been practicing the next 2 stages, which is actually really 1 stage, but I like to have even numbers so I could create a 10. But anyway, so I divided the next stage into 2. And actually it makes some sense, because the next 2 stages would be integration and embodiment. And this will probably take the rest of my life. But to integrate the experience of realizing your infinite Buddha nature with also expressing through a finite human body-mind, this takes a lot of practice. So just because you have an awakening, that's not the end of the story. Now you have to integrate. And it's rocky. It can be rocky, It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I had this experience or this insight, and then like, what? I still have to wash the dishes, I have to do the laundry, It's like, what? Infinite Buddha has to do the laundry. Okay. So you learn to it's like, so you start to learn to integrate the experience so that, you're not just lost in la la land all the time. You're actually trying to be helpful and present in the here and now. Have you heard that expression, too heavenly minded to be any earthly good?
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people who have this experience, give them a few months because they're still on cloud 9, and who knows. But fortunately for me, I had a lot of practice and teachers, so I didn't I didn't stay in the clouds too long. But anyway, integration's kind of rocky, and embodiment is more like you're now getting the hang of it. You're now being a clear channel, a clear vessel of infinite light in the here and now, the divine and in the human, just all flowing, all one, and it's not like so different, So, and I think that people who are at the embodiment stage are like saints, Just being around them, you can feel their energy. They just radiate love and light and wisdom. There's one Buddhist saint that I just totally love her story. I never met her before, but I still, for some reason, I just feel so close to her. Her name is Deepa Ma, and I hope you'll read about her story sometime. But people said that they would go to her little apartment, and as they were walking up the steps, they could feel the light and the energy of love before they even walked into the room. And then when they would enter, the first thing she would always do to her guests was to bow to them and put her hands on them and just bless them. And there are so many stories of people when she touched them, the moment she touched them, they felt waves of liquid love pour through their body, and they'd go into states of shanti or samadhi for several days. But this is what happens when we are at this point of full embodiment of this awakening reality of who we really are. We just naturally radiate that and bless people just by being present. And then, of course, on the 10th stage, I would call Buddhahood, full enlightenment. So anyway, this is how I understand what all this is all about. The whole universe is just a Buddha-making machine. But we need to go through everything, all of these different stages. And of course, sometimes some of us, the suffering part sometimes stays throughout, And sometimes we keep going back to seeking and seeking and seeking and recommitting, and some people go directly from suffering all the way to awakening because of some shock to their system, like some near-death experience or on the mountaintop or even a drug experience or whatever. It's like they suddenly awake and see true reality, but only for a moment. And then for the rest of their life they're feeling confused. They don't know what to make of this, which is why you can never skip any of these stages, including meditation. Yes, people can awaken without meditation, but you still need to meditate, even after awakening, so you can process it and be of more service to others. Because as you meditate, you transform this body-mind so that it can become a clearer channel of that initial awakening that you had. But if you just have an awakening out of the blue, you're not going to be as much help to others without going through all the others, committing to a practice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you skip certain things, you eventually, over time, you're going to have to actually do all the homework. Because but here's the thing. This is the most important part of my insight from my experience a few years ago. Of all of these stages, do you guess which is the most important? You cheated. You probably heard my talk before. Yes, number 2, the one we don't like the most. But I saw it very clearly that this was the very ingredient that we needed for all the rest to happen. Because otherwise, there's only. And by the way, the innocence actually never was lost. Who we are as Buddha nature is always been there. We are always original, blessing, purity, all of that. But in our human experience, we seem to experience that we lost it, but we really never did. But see, if we had not gone through this stage 2, we would just be forever, eternally just the innocent, bland, white light. But that's not what we chose. We chose to refract into a billion, zillion, gazillion colors of the rainbow, so that instead of just having one bland Buddha nature, we would have infinite numbers of Buddhas of various kinds. To use Christian language, God was not satisfied just being God, but wanted to have infinite numbers of children of God, or infinite numbers of expressions of God, manifesting God's infinite qualities in all different ways and unique ways. Which is why you cannot compare yourself to anyone else, because your journey is uniquely your journey. Jesus' journey was different from your journey, but you are equally a child of God as Jesus. And the Buddha's journey was different from your journey, but you are equally an expression of enlightenment as the Buddha. And so it's just that you're not fully baked yet. We have to go through the oven, okay? But and it's not always pleasant, but when we come out, we are fully awakened Buddha, expressing in our own unique way. So it was the will of the infinite that there should not just be one kind of Buddha, but infinite numbers of kinds. And that's what we're all about. And this is why this universe exists. So walk your path. Enjoy the example of others' paths, but know that you have your own unique path that no one in the entire universe can have except you. So next time when you're down on yourself, remember that. Who you really are is exquisite beyond imagining. So just remember that this part is important and it's there for a reason. I know in our human experience we hate it, we don't like it, but it's what makes us unique. It's what makes us develop wisdom and compassion. It's what makes us beautifully who we are. Amitabha.